Well, we're going to wrap up today by talking about England. Guys, I know that you were both at Wembley for Thomas Tuchel's World Cup announcement. I must admit that I was particularly underwhelmed by the group of players that he's going to take with him to the US, Canada and Mexico. So I'm just going to start with your first reactions. James, we'll start with you as our main England correspondent. What do you think of the group that he's taking to the World Cup? Are you in favour? There's been an awful lot of talk about players he's missed out, but broadly, do you like it?
I think Thomas Tuchel has been searching for an identity by his own admission. He's trying to work out how England should play. I think what this squad says is that he's clear in his mind about how they're going to play. Because it's only in that context that you can't look at it as the individuals necessarily that are missing out. He said it virtually the opening statement he gave in the press conference on Friday was, teams win tournaments. And when you look at this squad, you can pretty much nail down who the starting 11 is going to be. I'd say there's one or two maybe doubts, but you pretty much know who the starting 11 is going to be. And you pretty much know who the first subs, first alternates are going to be. And there's a clarity about that, which I like, and I think is informed by what happened at the last Euros. And I asked Tuchel whether he'd spoken to Southgate or any other international coaches, and he said, no, this has all come from us. But he did mention that they'd also sort of had internal feedback from the last European Championships. And I thought that's really interesting because you can start to understand why he's picked this squad when you think about what happened at the last European Championships. The squad, there were issues within that squad. They didn't all get on. There was a confused style on the pitch. Southgate, and I will defend him to a great extent because I think he's done a fantastic job. He did a fantastic job as England manager. But that last tournament, even though they got to the final, was a bit of a mess in terms of what they were trying to do, how they were trying to play, changing the midfield as it went along with Trent in there, and then obviously kind of almost stumbled on Kobbie Mainoo. None of that is going to happen this summer. There is a clear lineup, a clear plan. He has been very, very clear with these players that he's taken a sort of band of brothers type feel rather than the individuals who all look good on paper. And that's what we were criticising Southgate for, wasn't it? We were saying, we've got all these attacking players, but there's no plan, there's no clear pathway. And then as it's kind of, time has gone on, and we reported it to some extent at the time, but there's more information that's come out since about the tensions behind the scenes. He's trying to strip all of that away. And I think he's tried to pick a squad that has that identity, that has some energy to it, and that everybody knows their role and is going to be prepared to support each other and be together 24/7 for what they hope will obviously be 7 weeks. So I think in Tuchel we trust, right? This is supposed to be the guy who takes us from Southgate and the absolute, on the brink of winning silverware. This is the guy who we're trusting to get us over the line. And the decisions he's made. Now, by leaving out the big names, as he's done, he's going to live or die by those decisions. But that's why you have an elite coach.
Tom, well, I should qualify what I said at the top of this segment. I've long since said you can't take the 26 best players to a tournament because it doesn't work. And I completely agree. I mean, I watched some of the press conference that Thomas Tuchel gave in front of you two guys, where he said, these are not necessarily the best or the most gifted players, but this is the best team. And I'm fully behind that. That said, I was expecting one of Foden, Palmer or Gibbs-White to go as some kind of X-factor player who you can kind of, maybe you start in some of the kind of the so-called lesser games, or maybe bring on in the knockout games to kind of find you that edge. I was expecting Harry Maguire to go, obviously not for the same reason, but I do think that he would add something to that group. Just in terms of your initial reaction to the squad, Tom, when you got that press release at Wembley, are you on the side of James, or are you a little bit more underwhelmed by it?
I think it was interesting that one of the last places yet to be reported before the squad was announced was whether Trent Alexander-Arnold had made it or not. And by that point, it was more a shrug or sort of raised eyebrows than it would have been a couple of years ago, where had he been left out, it would have been, protests at St George's Park and the rest of it. So we'd already seen the name Ivan Toney included. We'd seen Gibbs White, Foden and Palmer left out. So it's a strange old business, and it's interesting, as James said, he's certainly prioritising team cohesion and character. It's what he kept on mentioning the whole way through. And also, in his press conference, he also talked about how they have players for different scenarios, whether you're chasing a game, whether you're looking to close out a game. He talks about having specialists, whether it's someone like a disruptor in the box for Harry Kane, like Ivan Toney, penalty specialists and the rest of it. So he's scenario planning. And so he's trying to make sure this 26 is as malleable as possible to all the scenarios he's envisaging. So that's data that's done through the team psychologists he's spoken to. He did touch on how he spoke to Tony's coach in Saudi Arabia to check on how he was doing. That conversation with a player he used to coach seemed to be enough to convince Thomas Tuchel that he was worth taking. So once you start looking at that, you can kind of see how he's trying to map this all out. Having said that, I do think they are going to miss that sort of that person who could be a game changer in the closing stages. Whether it is, we saw Cole Palmer in the 24 final. Whether you look at Phil Foden, who tried, I know you guys have been talking about this for a while on the podcast about how Foden was a doubts for the World Cup squad, but that game at false 9 against Japan seemed to be the final nail in that coffin, really. But yeah, I was surprised, underwhelmed. I'm interested to see how those two warm-up games go in America, and James will be there for us to see how things go, really, because there was a time that 5-0 win in Serbia, he's clearly put so much sort of emphasis on that one as well. He referred to that a couple of times on Friday. So it's whether we're going to see that or we're going to see the team who looked pretty listless against Uruguay and Japan and also lost to Senegal.
Tom just mentioned there, James, that you are heading out to Miami, Florida for that pre-World Cup camp where the players are hoping to get acclimatized sort of weather-wise. Obviously, there's nothing riding on the 2 games that they're going to play there. But because of the noise and the conversation around this squad, are England going to have to show the fans something in those 2 games to kind of ignite their kind of, passion's the wrong word, but their kind of expectation for this tournament? Because it does feel like there does seem to be a little bit of kind of negative feeling now around this squad and what maybe this team can achieve at this tournament. Whereas when that game that Tom mentioned, that result in Serbia, there didn't seem to be that at that point.
No, well, I mean, I was at that game as well, and England were brilliant that night. And Tom's right. Tuchel's constantly referenced the September, October, November period because he really felt as though they had a core group there, a group of players who wanted to be there. I mean, note to producers to insert the clip now where I said, I think after the first Tuchel camp that Henderson would go. And the reason, despite Olley telling me that I was wrong.
So why waste a place on Jordan Henderson?
Because I think he's going to take him.
Really? At 36?
I think there's every chance that Henderson will go.
It's ludicrous to think he's going to be at the World Cup in 18 months' time.
Because it was about that culture, the band of brothers, and all of that sort of business. And what England need to show in Miami is the benefit of that. They can't go through the motions in those games. They need to be. Look, it doesn't really matter if they win them, obviously, but there needs to be energy, patterns of play, a real purpose, and a physical sort of show of that unity that Tuchel has prioritised. Because I do think you're right about the reactions to this squad, but I think it says a lot about just our media landscape in general. You think about it now about fans who only follow their team, and we see this increasingly with journalists who only write about one club, and they tend to champion the best player at those clubs, right? Understandably so. But it creates this sort of myopic narrative around each player that, like, as soon as a Gibbs White doesn't go, or as soon as a Foden doesn't go, well, there's, the people I write for every day are going to be up in arms about this because we watch Foden every week, or we watch Cole Palmer every week. We know what he can really do, even if there are some short-term issues there. I do think the way that the media landscape has gone in the last few years has kind of affected the conversation around an England squad when everybody's supposed to come together, no matter what club team you support, and get behind the squad. And maybe they don't have that perspective of seeing, probably don't watch all the England games throughout the year, the friendlies, the Nation League games, the qualifiers, and they probably don't watch a lot of the other players in this squad at rival teams, or certainly, regularly enough to sort of see how Tuchel's trying to put it together. Now, the one thing I would say, having been quite positive about this squad, is that I am quite downbeat about their chances overall, because I fear that no matter what squad they picked, fatigue is going to be a major issue. And again, I asked Tuchel about that, and he said it was the biggest challenge that they had to overcome. He was quite confident that they found a way to do that, that once the adrenaline kicks in and the prospect of being world champions is realised, it comes into view, that that will sort of make the tired legs go away. But these 2 warm-up games were decided relatively late. They're going to be played on pitches that are not ideal. You've got 4 Arsenal players who have played 63 games this season, or they will have by the time the Champions League final comes around. That's an awful lot of football. They're going to join up late. They're key players in the squad. You'd have to say Declan Rice, Bukayo Saka in particular, probably doubts for that first game. Could they really come in and play that first game? Maybe Rice can. I mean, Rice is the kind of player who seems to be able to go on forever. But you do have concerns about then the humidity, the fact that they could play Mexico City in the last 16 at altitude, all those habitual concerns around the England squad and the way that England have played in tournaments, and then the fact that they don't kick the ball well enough. I bang on about this all the time, that even under Southgate, 2018, you had Modric and Kovacic who took the game away from England in that semi-final against Croatia. Verratti and Jorginho did the same in the Euro 2020 final at Wembley. Obviously, the last Euros final, when Rodri went off injured, Zubimendi came in and Spain monopolised possession and eventually won the game. An awful lot is riding on Elliot Anderson. If Elliot Anderson can be that kind of player for England, then that really could be a game-changing moment for the team, and the prioritisation of keeping the ball well in these conditions, in tournaments like this. If he can solve that problem for England, then they have half a chance. But for me, there are too many unknowns, and the only X factor we have really is Thomas Tuchel. Can he make the difference? Is he the genius we all hope he will be that can end this long wait? I just feel there's too much to do, but I sincerely hope I'm wrong.
Well, let's finish that today then with some predictions. I know that you both love making predictions on this pod because I'll get chucked at you when they're invariably wrong. I'm less confident, having seen the squad. Not that it really particularly matters what is written on a piece of paper, but I'm less confident now. I'm with you, James. That potential game against Mexico in Mexico City at altitude looks horrendous for a group of players who are going to be so tired after what is a grueling season in the Premier League and Europe. So just, are you more confident or less confident having seen the squad, and where do you think England are going to get to? Tom, you go first.
Probably less confident, I have to say, and also just factoring in the Aston Villa players who have had an unbelievable season with the Europa League too. But looking at Konsa, Rodgers, Watkins is there as well. Like Konsa's numbers are also ridiculous this season, so he's also going to be shattered. I think you're looking at, if they get through the Mexico game, then it's potentially Brazil, I think, up next, and that's Ancelotti and the rest of it. So he's going to have a plan. I think that's probably their sort of natural ceiling at the moment. Again, I hope I'm wrong, but I think that's where they'll sort of end up. The squad, I think also you're looking at the fitness at right backs. He's banking a huge amount on Reece James getting through this, Livramento as well. Quansah's there, I guess, in the Ben White role where he can cover centre back and right back as well. But if Reece James picks up a knock early on, Livramento is not quite there, then suddenly you're going to hear a lot about Trent Alexander-Arnold. So look, that's risky. It's definitely risky. He's got a plan. He's sticking to it. That's why he's paid a huge amount of money. That's why he's won the Champions League. But equally, a couple of injuries here and there, a couple of knocks, and it's going to come unstick very quickly.
James?
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't really shifted my view, because I just don't, I'm actually weirdly, I'd be more confident about them playing Brazil in the quarters than I would be about Mexico in the last 16, because having covered the Club World Cup, obviously, Rob, you were out there as well. We can't really overstate the importance of these conditions. And while Southgate made such great strides with this, it's kind of impossible to overcome fatigue when you've got Crystal Palace in the Conference League final, Aston Villa win the Europa League, Arsenal win the Champions League, and the Premier League title race goes to whatever it was, 10 days from the end of the season. These are intense seasons that are going to be in the legs of the players. And some of these players are just, it's going to be too much for them. So I really, really hope I'm wrong. It's going to require Tuchel to use this squad and get every last drop out of all 26. And maybe we're going to see an awful lot of rotation, maybe more than we're used to seeing. And maybe that's the way that they're going to try and peak as the tournament goes on. But yeah, for me, it's probably round of 16 and quarters at best. But I just don't see them beating Mexico.
Well, that's all we've got time for this week. Thanks to Tom and to James. We'll be back with more football reporters next week.